All right, what's up, guys? Chuck and Chris live here on Wednesday, August 14th. We've got 22 days left to draft. Preseason week 1 in the books. We've got some big injury news that came out today, so we'll get into it. Chris, how we doing?
Chuck, I'm doing great. It's always a pleasure to be with you here on the Sticks to talk about fantasy football. And we have gotten a tremendous amount of news, not just from the preseason games this past week, but just in general with some injuries from recent practices. Obviously, cover boy of the stream here. We're anticipating Sam Darnold is now the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings because rookie JJ McCarthy is going to be out for the season with a meniscus injury that he had surgery on, I believe it was either yesterday or today, that is going to knock him out for the season. Chuck, I'm happy to talk through kind of how we feel about everything that we've learned. And for those watching, we are going to be drafting a Best Ball Mania team on this show live tonight. So I am actually going to get started with that here in a second. Chuck, I know on our last show, which I was not with you for, you were going through some things that we learned that some of the great content writers affiliated with Underdog put out of preseason week 1. So maybe we can sprinkle in some more of our learnings from that as we wait for this draft to take off here. You have anything you want to talk about before I get started?
No, I figured we could just try and hit on them when the guys get, when we're at like that ADP in the draft, I guess.
Cool. Well, I will first and foremost see if I can get my location permissions to actually work. This seems to be a regular occurrence when I try to jump into a draft here. Early thoughts for you on this Vikings offense. Got 7 spots open in a fast BBM 5 if anybody watching wants to jump in while we wait here. I don't know if this has changed my opinion on Justin Jefferson at all. I'm kind of QB agnostic with a player like him, man. I think he's just going to be just fine no matter what.
Yeah, because the arguments were that I think there were 5 games with random quarterbacks he had last year. And so there's argument. He had good games. If you extrapolate those rates out to a full season, it's the best wide receiver season of all time. Granted, 2 of those games I'm pretty sure were against really bad offenses. But in the end, I am still going to draft Justin Jefferson just as much. We did bring up the possibility that they bring in somebody else at quarterback. Somebody reported that they inquired about Derek Carr. But even with Sam Darnold, I don't know. I've seen him get drafted a lot in like the 18th, 19th rounds today. And I don't know. If I need a quarterback at the end of drafts, I'll take him. But I'm still not super confident that he's the starter for the playoff weeks.
Yeah, that's kind of where I net out too. Based off of the information we have, we don't really have any idea who the quarterback would be other than Darnold, but I don't think there's a stranglehold on this job here. If Minnesota feels like there's a veteran out there that can help them improve their season here, I feel like they'd be motivated to go out and make a move. So I'm with you, round 18, especially if I'm looking really just if I don't feel great, I guess, about my quarterback situation, need a third quarterback or want to pair a quarterback with Jefferson. I'm in on Darnold now. And the reality, Chuck, is McCarthy didn't really have a super high ADP anyway, at least here on Underdog. So I don't think there's much that's going to change from this particular piece of news.
Yeah, and like he was the guy I was clicking on the most at the end of drafts. Granted, I had a lot of Addison. I have a bunch of Justin Jefferson, but I did start to mix it up a little bit, adding in Bo Nix and Drake May. And like, I don't know, Bo Nix seems like he's going to start. Drake May's offensive line can't protect anybody, so I'm a little bit nervous about adding on more of him. But like the casual drafters have definitely come in because these quarterbacks are gone by like round 17. If you don't have your backup quarterback set up, you have to kind of flip a coin with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew.
I don't know if we got the number 11 pick here, and the first round is kind of already off to a wild start. Bijan Robinson, first pick on the draft here on the stream. Hey, get your guys, I guess, right? If you don't have a lot of teams that you're putting in, and you really like Bijan, good for you, man. I'm not gonna begrudge him of that. One of the things, speaking of quarterbacks that go super late, I am going to share some Drake May propaganda as we get started here. This was a post by at FBall Insights, Football Insights here on Twitter, looking at college rushing tendencies and then the NFL fantasy scoring for quarterbacks in their rookie season based off of those tendencies. We see at the top of the table here, Chuck, that Anthony Richardson, we already knew this, I think, led all rookie quarterbacks historically in fantasy points per dropback. That's what that last column on the right is. Look at all the green kind of on the screen there for scrambling percentages, 10 plus yard runs for the guys at the top of the table: Richardson, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. And then if you go down to the bottom here and looking at the rookie class this year, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May. Drake May's scrambling upside, Chuck, looks a hell of a lot like the quarterbacks at the top of this list, which is definitely the place that you want to be in fantasy. I know that obviously there are a lot of concerns with the upside of the New England Patriots in fantasy this year. They all have super low ADPs. I think even with the news about McCarthy, they're probably still the favorites to have the worst record in the NFL this year. There's some reports as we get ready to prepare for preseason week 2, a single game slate tomorrow. We'll have some preseason content over on the regular Occupy Fantasy channel that'll be coming out for that. With the Patriots facing off against the Eagles here in week 2, we've got some news that Patriots offensive line doesn't look so great. So that could be another reason people aren't excited about Drake May. But as we said with Sam Darnold, I think if we're focused on who is going to be playing at the end of the season, because that's where all the prize money is in contests like Ball Mania 5, I still think Drake May is a really, really good late round pick at quarterback. And I think you have to like him even better now that we have one less certain option, if you will, in that range of the draft board.
Yeah, I think so too. Like I've mentioned on streams before, like make sure you get a quarterback earlier because I tend to punt, and it's been a lot harder to punt recently, especially Justin Fields goes 30 picks here. I did notice Justin Fields was 5th on that list that you just pulled up, points per dropback, so that's nice to see.
What am I going to do here? I think I'm going to take Marvin Harrison. I still have not been able to convince myself to click on Puka Nacua. Probably a mistake overall in general. I don't really have either of these guys though, and I feel a little bit better about stacking the Cardinals than the Rams right now. That's probably a leak in my process, Chuck, but that's where I'm at.
Well, so the 10 through 12 pick is just so brutal right now, especially with Jahmyr Gibbs. Apparently he's expected to be okay for week 1, but we know these things can linger. And so I've scooped some of the falling value a little bit. I've seen him fall as far as like pick 21, Jahmyr Gibbs. Are you still going to be clicking on him if he falls a little bit?
I mean, if he's still here at 14, that's kind of his ADP at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't mind it. I think I'm still a little more excited about the top wide receiver options that are here, though.
Yeah, same. I tend to reach for like Devontae Debo or Nico Collins. Mm-hmm. Just taking really weird combos with these last 3 pick spots.
So I don't. Speaking of JJ's last quarterback, I will take Drake London here. I like this kind of combination here at the end of the board. I don't, unlike last year where like your super chalk combination here ended up being important in the playoff weeks, was like those Detroit Lions, Dallas Cowboys game stacks with CD, Amon-Ra St. Brown, all those guys. I don't know if we really have the preferred path here at the end of the draft, but I feel like stacking this Arizona Cardinals and this Rams game is probably one of the ones I'm most interested in.
That one, and then like I mentioned, I've been taking Debo early here, and so I've been taking Sam Laporta in the 3rd round too to make kind of like a second, 3rd round stack, and then hopefully my 1st round guy just does it.
But this is, I haven't had very many draft. I'm still only like 35 drafts in here in BBM. I haven't had very many picks on the second half of the board. I've actually been running kind of hot with picks like 1 through 4. If I go through my portfolio, I'll have those numbers handy next show we have together, probably tomorrow. So I am just kind of trying to get my guys still here at the end of the board, if that makes sense.
I'm very focused on getting my guys right now, especially with these draft rooms are wild. I mean, here, Tyreek Hill going 5th. A month ago, you would never see Tyreek Hill go 5th. And I've seen CMC, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill go in every spot from 1 through 6 now. Like, I think I saw... Go ahead.
Is this what we have been preparing ourselves and our viewers and been talking about for weeks? Like the casuals are finally here, right? They're in the draft rooms and they're taking who they want when they want.
Yeah, and it's like, so we drafted earlier to get that ADP value, and in the end, it probably even, like, I lost a bunch of roster spots like JJ McCarthy and other guys getting hurt early. Does that outweigh the ADP value I get on guys like James Conner, Rashee Rice, maybe Justin Fields if he's good? Sometimes it might.
So, I guess hit me with some learnings from preseason week 1 that you haven't covered that you think the people should know about. What are we looking at?
So unfortunately, the article is not in ADP order, but I'm just going to go by the stuff that I want to hit on. Brian Thomas Jr., one of the guys you've been preaching all summer, who I mentioned on the previous stream. I probably wouldn't have drafted much if it wasn't for your endorsement. So I'm happy to have some. He started in 2 wide receiver sets with Gabe Davis. Christian Kirk was off the field. It was only 2 snaps. They did something like this last preseason, and I think they even might have done it in regular season game 1. But does this change anything on your view on Brian Thomas? Is it just wheels up?
I think that's the best way to describe it. Definitely wheels up with Brian Thomas. I'm glad that you brought up Jacksonville did something similar last year on their first game and like one drive with their starters. I don't think like on the other side of the equation here, this is like a full panic meter for Christian Kirk. I don't think the sample size is large enough for us to really worry about that. If he is playing in 3 wide receiver sets, if he's largely like their primary slot receiver, I think he's still going to be a phenomenal value in a pass heavy offense in fantasy. This is more about confirmation that Brian Thomas is going to play a valuable, a valuable role in fantasy. And we have a piece of information that supports that. So of course, on our shows that we do on this channel, I'm going to take advantage of every opportunity I get to bring Brian Thomas propaganda to the people.
And especially, it feels like that signals that he's going to have a role from week 1, which is pretty huge for a rookie receiver. Going, I mean, he's not going that early, but he's going in the mid rounds.
Yeah, 77th overall, I think, is the ADP right now. Let's pull that up and take a look. Which it hasn't moved that much. It's been in that spot for like a couple months now. But I'm happy to click on him there still, Chuck. I think he's going to be, we know now, we feel like he's going to be a top 2 option in terms of routes run. One of the better offenses in the league. I know the Jaguars were disappointing down the stretch in 2023, but they were still a pretty good offense to be invested in fantasy.
And then another receiver who, did he just go off the board or is about to? Malik Neighbors suffered a minor injury in camp. Are we worried about that at all?
No, it's still too early in the process here, and I think the coaching staff came out and said that they think he's going to be good to go. So he actually still went right on, maybe even a little ahead of ADP here. Pick 23 tonight, end of the second round to the CeeDee Lamb owner out of the 2 hole. So really going for that NFC East correlation there out of the 2 hole in this draft to start this contest.
So the Giants, Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton did not play, but Malik Neighbors started in the 2 wide receiver sets, and then they moved him into the slot on a 3rd and 9 play to get a better matchup for him, and he looked as fast as we all remember in college. So it just sounds good for him anyway.
All right. We've got a little bit of a wide receiver run. I've got 2 receivers. I don't really have many builds that are even close to where I'm at with the teams I have here. So I guess with the Cardinals, I'm looking for some Rams correlation. All the best players for that are gone. Commanders here with the Falcons week 17, New York Giants week 16, and the Raiders in week 15. And granted, top picks, Chuck, I'm not as worried about playoff correlation. I'd rather be more focused on correlation the later we get. Because of some of the great data you've shared with us, drafting for correlation with your top, 2 picks is typically what most users are doing. So I think differentiating a little bit is still on the table here. Passing on, so I'll just come out and say it. I think my highest owned team in general is the Baltimore Ravens. I think we saw them come very, very close to winning a championship last year. I'm teeing myself up here, Chuck, to basically ask you, do you think it makes sense for me to take Lamar Jackson at first quarterback off the board here next round? Or is that like a little too aggressive here?
No, I think it's fine. Just like you said, he doesn't get drafted on this side of the board that often, and he's paired with Mark Andrews at a higher rate than he is with, say, Flowers. So I think this is fine because it's like the upside you're getting from Lamar, the guys you're passing up to get Lamar at your next pick. I don't think you're passing up too much, right?
No. And like I said, he's my favorite quarterback this year. I actually have him and Jalen Hurts like basically virtually tied at the top of quarterback 1 for the season for me. Any of these top 4 guys by ADP though, Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Jackson, like I love all of them. But if I was picking my favorite, it would definitely be Lamar here. And look, we saw the efficiency last year. They were probably the best team in the AFC, even though it didn't materialize that way in the playoffs. So, and I don't really have any reason. I don't think we have any reason to expect anything different as far as fantasy production this year out of the Ravens. They should still be pretty strong this year. Same offensive coordinator coming back. So plenty of reason to still be buying into the Ravens. Obviously, ADP still thinks they're going to be great too. So we did reach for Lamar. Now we have probably my favorite way to stack with Lamar in terms of playoff correlations left ahead of us. I do think with the Houston Texans, I've hammered on this player a few times as undervalued. I think I'm probably going to end up getting scooped now that I'm bringing this to the people, but we're doing the shows to help people get better at drafting. I love getting Dalton Schultz in the middle of drafts for some exposure to the Texans.
I saw someone argue that Schultz is a bad pick at ADP because it's the offense is too stacked, and I see it the opposite way. It's one of the best offenses in the league, and Dalton Schultz is by far like the cheapest piece of it.
Yeah, and it's at a position that's just weaker in fantasy in general. If you don't have, like, I think he's kind of, if you look at ADP order, I think he's kind of the last guy that I look at that I am comfortable saying, okay, he's my top tight end on my roster. Like that's how I look at Dalton Schultz. He's where the line break is for me.
And speaking of Houston, so they had Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs start in 2 wide receiver sets, and then Tank Dell popped in for a 34-yard touchdown. Dell not getting the nod over Diggs in preseason week 1 isn't a death sentence. It's not best case scenario. Diggs did play the slot on most of their 3 wide receiver sets.
Yeah, so I just think we need more data there, right? They're going to use all 3 of those guys pretty regularly. I think expanding a little bit beyond those 3 key guys, Chuck, we've talked a few times anyway about like late round picks with Houston, guys like Noah Brown, for example. Do they have any value in fantasy this year?
Mm-hmm.
I think we have confirmation that they probably, Noah Brown probably doesn't hold a tremendous amount of value unless something happens to one of those 3 guys. I think all 3 of the early Texans receivers, we see Collins going here in the middle of the 2nd round, Diggs middle of 3rd round, and I think Dell goes pretty close to that. He actually went before Diggs in this particular draft, but that is not aligned with how ADP is here. I still think that's pretty directionally correct here, Chuck. I love still clicking on any of those 3 guys. I'm not really tremendously concerned about Tank Dell just because he wasn't starting in 2 wide receiver sets. I think that was probably the base expectation once they went out and got Stephon Diggs.
Well, earlier in the summer, I don't know if you remember me kind of ripping on Nico Collins going in the 2nd round, and now I love him as a 2nd round pick. And then I love Tank Dell. He's, if I get him in the 4th round, Rashee Rice is my favorite 4th round pick now, but it was Tank Dell until like yesterday. And then Stephon Diggs, I've only been mixing him in when I already have like a bunch of combos with Nico or Tank. Like I'll see that half of these teams that I have with Garrett Wilson have Tank and only 10% have Diggs. Like, all right, I'll mix it up with Diggs a little bit, but I don't know. Diggs could be the one that smashes. So, I mean, any of them could do it. It's just whoever goes off in the playoffs is going to end up being the best pick, right?
What was the? It's probably not in the article you're looking at there, but what was our popular meme with Stephon Diggs out of the week? That you get 1 touchdown pass to Tank Dell, and he was seen on the sideline complaining to CJ Stroud about his role on the 1 preseason drive. So, hey, squeaky wheel gets the oil, as they say. Diggs is definitely going to get his. So, I'm happy taking any of those guys. And Houston should be a very fun team to watch this year.
And then I think we're around where Rashad White goes. Very good things about the Buccaneers rookie center, Graham Barton.
Yep, I saw that.
So
you need a good offensive line to clear the path for you, right? And we saw White have a really, really strong role for the Bucs last year. I know it's not like the sexiest running back pick on the board, but not really. I think early on this offseason, we were very, very enthusiastic about Bucky Irving on this channel, and I'm still willing to click on him late. But the other side there is I don't think we've really seen any reason not to be interested in Rashad White, even though we don't talk about him a tremendous amount on this channel. I think he's still a fine pick in his ADP range.
Yeah, I think I was off him a bit because the rushing efficiency numbers are pretty bad, right? But if they're going to depend on him for this role in the passing game, then it kind of outweighs it. And so I've been clicking him on a lot more than I have been before.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it, man. The volume trumps everything, even if the efficiency isn't fully there. So if he's going to have it, then that kind of makes up for it. Man, I have my favorite receiver that I love clicking on in this range staring at me. I don't have a running back yet, and I think there's actually a strong chance, as long as Burgundy here doesn't scoop me, that I might have a running back that fits pretty nicely with what I'm trying to build here that I'm potentially interested in this spot. Who are your favorite? Okay, Jaden Reed comes off the board. Who are your favorite running backs in this range? I have Joe Mixon. We were just talking about Rashad White, Kenneth Walker, David Montgomery. Who do you like clicking on here the most?
Well, after the Jameer Gibbs news yesterday, David Montgomery right now, if we think that his ADP is going to go up, he's the guy that I'm going to focus on clicking on. I mean, James Conner is my favorite one. He's moving up in ADP. Kenneth Walker, with reports that Charbonnet might be banged up now. And they were already reporting that he was going to have a bigger role in the passing game, which is huge. Joe Mixon, I'm nervous about because of the injury lingering thing, but I'm clicking on basically all of these guys, probably with a preference towards Walker and Montgomery.
I think Montgomery's my favorite. I went with Mixon here just because of the Baltimore correlation. I'm sure you already knew that.
Oh, yeah.
But David Montgomery has, I don't think we're expecting any kind of a role reduction. I think we've made this point on a few different shows. ADP, same range it was in last year, smashed that last year. Like, he's just an easy pick. But right here, okay, interesting. He did not go there. I think I'm still kind of loading up my Chris Godwin bags, Chuck. I don't know what else I can say about Chris Godwin that I haven't already said. I love him at ADP. Is really all I'm going to say at this point.
Yeah, I was clicking on him so much when I was kind of fading these running backs in this range a little bit, but now I'm overweight on Godwin, which I want to be, but I'm trying to catch up with, like I said, Rashad White and Kenneth Walker. So Godwin's one of the casualties from that. But
yeah. So pick 83 is when I will pick again, and there's a decent chance I need. Looking at my primary correlation with the Ravens now, some Steelers correlation in Week 16, and I'm basically sitting right on a spot where I should hopefully be able to get one of their running backs. And like I said, I don't know if it's in the article that you've been looking at for some news out of preseason Week 1. So if I'm spoiling something, I do apologize, Chuck. You can just cross it off and move on to the next thing. But I believe we got in their brief appearance with the starters, each of Najee Harris and Jalen Warren literally split snaps 50-50. So even though we got a new offensive coordinator there with Arthur Smith coming over to Pittsburgh, it looks like we can expect Najee and Jalen Warren to have similar roles to last year, which is what we expected.
Yeah, the only note in here about the Steelers is Van Jefferson is the wide receiver too, which is something we can talk about later, I guess. But I'm basically even on both of those running backs. I think that I have a slight preference for Warren on PPR sites and Najee on half PPR sites like Underdog. But if either one is there, I'm usually just clicking on whoever's first in ADP. And I think that lines up with the scoring system of whatever site I'm on.
Yeah, right now Najee's average pick is 84th, Jalen Warren 86.7, so like really not a tremendous difference at all right now on this site.
A guy that we just passed though in the previous round, Josh Jacobs. You have any thoughts on Josh Jacobs? He had a first down carry, second down reception, and played the third down, and that's it. Played three plays.
I feel a lot better about where his role is at with like some of the narrative and news that has been out there about their rookie pick, Marshawn Lloyd. Mm-hmm. And I think Lloyd himself a little banged up right now. But if Green Bay beats, if Green Bay people are talking about, hey, AJ Dillon is not dead yet, like he has a really good chance to be competing for these RB2 reps, like that's almost a reverse case to me for us to buy Josh Jacobs here, because we already know what AJ Dillon is. We're not super excited about what he brings to the table in fantasy. AJ himself, an avid fantasy player, I think he would almost begrudgingly admit that himself. Maybe not publicly. So I do think Josh Jacobs is going to be a really, really good pick this year, and I don't have enough of him, to be honest with you.
I feel the same way. Yeah, a guy who I was kind of ignoring, and now I want to make sure I get a little bit more.
I wanted to see how far Marquise Brown, now known as Hollywood here on Underdog and across the World Wide Web, 75th overall, quite a drop. I think this is right around the range when we first got the legal issues news about Rashee Rice, that he had actually like kind of bottomed out around this range before he started creeping back up again. So it's almost like they flipped spots.
Yeah, so that. What was that contest yesterday? They released 15-second clocks, whatever, something 6. 20 max $3. I maxed it out last night in about 2 hours. That was fun. But Hollywood, I was taking when he was falling into the 80s pretty regularly, and that feels pretty good because the whole idea is he's there for the playoff weeks, and hopefully I'm strong enough at receiver that doesn't matter for the regular season. I am hammering Rashee Rice as much as possible, though. He's like my highest exposed player on Underdog now.
buying the dip on Hollywood, in some of those formats, thinking about where the prize money is, thinking about who's going to be available at the end of the season. And it just lines up with my overarching mantra that I say on all the shows we do together. I like players that are on good teams. So, yeah, buying guys that are deliberately injured, it's not a strategy that we would recommend for managed leagues or anything like that. But that's why these best ball tournaments are a completely different beast, man.
Especially the ones that have been open for a long time, like BBM. Like a lot of these teams have Hollywood Brown drafted in the 50s, Rashi Rice drafted in the 70s. So that's just one thing to consider, especially when you're drafting these players whose ADPs have changed dramatically.
I will tell you the player I was hoping would fall to me in the 5th round, went a couple picks ahead of my spot, is Xavier Worthy, their first round pick at wide receiver. I feel a lot better about him now that there's some uncertainty amongst the rest of the position group there. Okay. We're not feeling great about the status of Minnesota's offense with uncertainty at quarterback. I do like Ramondre Stevenson. I don't really have a reason to be in on him here. I think I'm slightly overweight on Najee over Jalen Warren, and so for that reason, I think I'm going to even that out here and take Jalen Warren.
I like it. Yeah, basically taking everyone in this range except Samir White.
So let's talk about that, because I think there's a feeling that he's still the guy in the Raiders backfield. So why are you not as excited about that?
Brian and Leeds definitely talked me out of him. I was already pretty low on him anyway. But I don't know. It is a small sample. Like, he could be good. The sample showed he was okay, but I just have more confidence, I think, in every other guy around him. I don't think it's so much Samir as it is where he goes, because I have taken him like when he falls 10 picks, but that's about it.
I could not be more in on Curtis Samuel than I am after watching the Bills this past weekend. And you might be saying to yourself, what exactly are you talking about? The Bills got curb stomped in that preseason game. Josh Allen didn't look great in his limited work. But what I noticed was Curtis Samuel was all over the field. He was being utilized. And let's not forget, Chuck, Curtis Samuel is a player that was drafted by the Carolina Panthers and was one of the last additions to that regime of Buffalo's current general manager. So that means Buffalo had an opportunity to go out and specifically target this player to come and eat into the available target share vacated by Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. And one of the first players that they wanted to bring in, a player that they had scouted before, granted with a different regime, Curtis Samuel, and the usage matched up with something we would expect for a pretty large role here in the regular season. So I really love having him as a piece of Buffalo's offense.
And we do have a note from the Underdog article on the Bills. Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir started when the Bills opened the game in a 2 wide receiver set. It's not common for rookies. Keon Coleman stayed in for 3 wide receiver sets. MVS and Curtis Samuel mixed in. Keon Coleman was the only first-team offense player to run a route on all 5 dropbacks. Shakir got 3, Samuel got 3, MVS got 2.
Yeah. So, I think they probably want to see more from Coleman here in the preseason. Obviously, the news is the best about Coleman, but not only did we see those 3 receivers, Samuel, Shakir, and Coleman, get the majority of the work there, we also had some paper transactions, if you will, from Buffalo since this past weekend, where they kind of cleaned up the roster a little bit. I believe Chase Claypool, one of the casualties there, on injured reserve. So I think they've pretty much solidified the top of the depth chart at receiver, and we can confidently say Curtis Samuel is going to be up there, and I like getting him at a discount compared to Keon Coleman anyway.
I will say the last blurb in here, it's worth noting the Bills manufactured a few plays directly to Samuel, who now projects for more of a rotation than initially expected. I saw someone tweet the other day, like something about being deranged for drafting Curtis Samuel in the 80s. What do you like? Obviously, you feel differently.
No, maybe I am deranged. I'd be happy to be considered deranged. I think I've been drafting Curtis Samuel for 7 years now. So I love the skill set of a player here that is like I've always described him as, even though I guess he's the older player here, as like a Deebo Samuel light, because he can have that role out of the backfield for manufactured touches. And he's probably on the best offense that he has ever been on in the National Football League here in year 7 of his career with Josh Allen under center. So it's hard for me to find a true bear case for him here in the 8th round, especially, Chuck, when I'm just chasing ceiling. He's my 5th receiver, that I've drafted on this roster. With Harrison, London, Flowers, and Godwin. Like I love having Samuel as a fourth, fifth option, not necessarily as like a second or third option. Again, going back to what format are we playing? I don't think he's a player that many are going to feel great about like slotting into their starting lineups in managed leagues this year. But I love the upside and the ceiling case for spike week potential here with Samuel in these types of formats.
I agree on him, and I've been taking Shakir a lot too. Still fully fading Coleman, but taking a bunch of Samuel and Shakir. The guy that just went off the board, Zach Moss. So Chase Brown finally flipped Zach Moss. I wish Zach Moss would fall a few more picks to like the end of the 9th round, but his ADP isn't falling as much as Chase Brown's has been going up. But Zach Moss was sick for preseason week 1, so Chase Brown played 100% of snaps with Joe Burrow. There's nothing to take from this yet.
We got Caleb Williams and Joe Burrow both going back to back. Caleb Williams drafted by King Caleb Will 18. So I feel like that pick was telegraphed before this contest even started. What do you think about the number 1 overall pick from this past draft? I think the buzz was very, very positive after his debut.
Well, in the words of Hayden Winks, Caleb Williams looked dynamic and in control during his first preseason game. The Bears designed a handful of bootleg rollouts to get him on the move, and Williams made a couple signature strikes on the move. More importantly, his feet were quiet, and he had multiple full field progressions after audibling. He looked like a veteran. Bears fans should be really, really excited. Yeah, I mentioned before I was down on him, but that's starting to go away.
Yeah, no, Hayden's a great analyst, and we're not just saying that because Underdog pays us. It's true. I was impressed with what I saw from Caleb as well. Watching that game was one of the only ones I really kind of watched this past weekend pretty closely just to kind of see how he looked, as I'm going to slam Brian Robinson as my third running back on this team because I needed some Week 17 correlation with Drake London just to kind of tie that up. And even though Williams didn't lead any touchdown drives for the Bears, they kind of stalled out in the red zone a couple of times. He just looked like I describe it as pocket presence. Like he just looked like a pro. That's kind of what Hayden said. He looked like he was just ready to play. Looked like he belonged in the NFL. Went through his progressions, made the correct reads, made the correct throws, made plays with his legs when it was appropriate. Like he just looks like a guy that's ready to rock, man. So I'm happy to have him. And we're gonna go with another running back here, Devin Singletary, that I think has a lot of value here in this range. And there is Week 16 correlation with the Atlanta Falcons, with the New York Giants. I think we potentially got some news that there was some movement at the back of the depth chart, like for the secondary RB for the Giants, although I guess the injury that took place may not have been as bad as we initially thought. You know what I'm talking about? Chuck, you are no longer with me. He was expecting a food delivery. So what I was talking about was Tyrone Tracy suffered an injury in practice, and I think was taken out with an air cast. But I think that the Giants have actually reported that it might not be as bad as it looked. I will ask Chuck to keep me honest on that when he comes back in the room. It's a good time to mention that if you're not yet playing fantasy sports contests on Underdog Fantasy, we have our promo code on the screen, Occupy2. You can sign up today, deposit. You get a 50% match on your deposit up to $250. So that means if you deposit $500, you get a free $250 on top of that to start playing with. Easiest, most fun place to play different fantasy sports contests here on Underdog. It's not just these best ball drafts. There are also champions or pick'em fantasy stack contests you can enter, and we're going to basically talk about those all summer and fall and then winter long throughout the rest of the NFL season, postseason, NBA season coming up that I know Chuck's excited about. Chuck, how are you? Welcome back to the show. What is going on?
Yep, I had a delivery scheduled for 5:50. Showed up at 5:45. Perfect. I do see you took Brian Robinson and Devin Singletary, though, two guys I'm very excited about. Devin Singletary in particular, because we saw Tyrone Tracy go down. And
thank you. That's what I was trying to ask you about before I noticed you were no longer in the picture. Tyrone Tracy, did we get news that isn't as bad as we initially thought, or are we expecting him to miss some time?
The last thing I saw was he left in an air cast, which sounds awful, but then he was in a team meeting later that day. So it doesn't seem like it's serious. But I've been taking some more Eric Gray the past couple of days. Like I can't take a Steam A at the end of every draft. So
yeah. But the point I was making is that news made me a little bit more excited about Devin Singletary, just because I think it
Yes.
solidifies his hold at the top of the depth chart here. And I had some correlation reasons to take both those running backs, Brian Robinson and Devin Singletary, each week 17, week 16 correlation respectively, with Drake London, who I took at the second round here in this team.
So you took Brian Robinson. Jaden Daniels looked good, I thought, in this preseason
Yeah.
week one. The rookie QB finished off a drive with a zone read keeper for a score. This is like talking about Jahan Dotson, who's someone I'm pretty sure I actually have 0% of through 1,100 drafts. But he didn't get pulled with the other starters. He played with the second string offense. De'Ami Brown was actually the unexpected starter. Anything to take away from this?
I wish that I paid a little bit more attention to the Commanders this past weekend, Chuck. I'm with you. I don't think I have any Dotson just yet. I definitely don't have any De'Ami Brown, and I think it will stay that way. I think I'm just most interested in McLaurin, the running backs, Jaden Daniels, Ben Sinnott at tight end. I still prefer him. I'm not really clicking on Zach Ertz. That's kind of how I'm handling the Commanders right now, personally.
So I was clicking on a ton of Ben Sinnott early in the summer. His ADP dropped by 50. I stopped clicking on him. He looked good, I thought, too, in the game. I saw one catch where it's like, is that Ben Sinnott or Sam Laporta? But I'm going to be fine clicking on him and Zach Ertz at the end of drafts, depending what my tight end room looks like.
And speaking of what tight end rooms look like,
your boy,
I am going to take... Well, I have Freiermuth and Dalton Schultz both sitting here. They don't have conflicting bye weeks. I'm going to try to see if I can just go back to back here and wrap up my my tight end allocation on this team here with these two guys. See how that goes.
I've had to force myself to click on some Freiermuth just in case.
That is kind of how I feel about it as well. I'm not excited to click on him, but we know he's going to play a pretty big role. And especially when we look at the uncertainty at receiver there in Pittsburgh, he's probably the de facto second option in the passing game, right? So we got to probably look at it that way.
And I want to mention, I feel like we lost Cole Kmet in this range, a guy who I was really excited about because we know he's capable of catching long touchdowns. But it looks like Gerald Everett's probably the starter. Maybe they're probably going to split snaps anyway, but it's going to be really tough to click on Kmet until he falls a couple of rounds now, I think.
We're seeing a separation finally, I think, in the way that I was hoping it would be all summer between Jerome Ford and Nick Chubb as Jerome Ford comes off the board. I think we've officially gotten confirmation that Chubb is definitely going to miss at least the first few weeks of the season. So as ADP settles with those two guys, how are you feeling about Jerome Ford? Are you still willing to click on him here, or how are you treating him?
Yeah, I think especially if at 136, I mean, this is a price we're paying for guys like Ty Chandler. Marshawn Lloyd has gone this high. Like if we're drafting Jerome Ford just as a handcuff, this seems okay because we know he's had success when he gets that work. But we do get like the first few weeks of where Jerome Ford is probably the RB1. I don't know if we saw an update on Deontay Foreman. But then what if Nick Chubb gets hurt again or isn't great? Then I think Jerome Ford has a role the whole season.
I got to probably even out my exposure there because I'm way overweight on Chubb. I've got a big Chubb for Chubb.
I think you did it right though.
Running back.
But you got most of it around ADP 150.
Right.
And so
yeah, so
you smashed.
Now's the time to get forward and even that out a little bit, just be in line with the field. We're 100% aligned there. My favorite running back in this range is the guy that just came off the board, J.K. Dobbins. I think he is set up to have a blow-up season here. As long as he can stay on the field, that has always been the issue with him. But it has never been a question about his ability, and now we probably get the cheapest cost on him we have ever had in fantasy football.
Yeah, still taking a bunch of him and Gus Edwards. Kamani Vidal hasn't fallen off the board yet, but I'm never clicking on him again, I don't think.
Yeah, one roster projection came out. I think he's like potentially just straight up getting cut, maybe stashed on the practice squad, but either way, not great. Looks like we're getting Tank Bigsby there. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I saw some people mention like, who's the guy? Isaiah Spiller? Is he still on the roster?
If we're asking if someone is still on the roster, we obviously don't feel great about them.
Oh, we're not clicking them. It's just a prayer that Dobbins and Gus Edwards stay healthy.
Yeah, he is still on the roster. That is something that we can, at least for now, for the next couple of weeks, we can say that that's true.
Okay.
This is what I find myself doing, by the way, when I go with an elite quarterback like Lamar Jackson. I still haven't taken a second guy.
I don't.
And this is right around when I start to kind of panic about that, Chuck. To be honest with you, so with some of the news or with some of the things we've learned from the preseason, is there anybody that goes in this range? I guess I'm going to draw the line below your favorite quarterback. Let's say like Will Levis and below by ADP. So that's excluding Baker and Geno. Who do you like the most down here?
I've mentioned like Bryce Young is probably the guy most likely to start 17 games, assuming he's healthy. I don't like him, but what if he doesn't suck? Derek Carr feels comfortable. Like, all right, I'm going to get some points at quarterback because he's probably going to start every game.
And what if he gets traded to Minnesota? Is that better for Derek Carr? It's hard to argue. Yeah, it's hard to argue against it. So, I'm officially, finally, I think, willing to click on Bo Nix. I haven't done it yet, but I think he looked okay in his first action. He's going to be starting here in week 2. Denver seems like they're pretty cheap as like a secondary stack, and I feel pretty good about Bo Nix, being the player that's going to be playing for Denver at the end of the season as well. So that's another guy I think I want to try to get a little bit of before we kick off in September.
And I'll mention Daniel Jones as a ceiling shot if you just want to shoot for pure upside, because he could easily get benched for performance reasons. I think there's some type of injury clause in his contract similar to what happened with Russell Wilson last season, that if he sucks, the Giants are incentivized not to play him during the playoff week. So that's the risk there. But he could score 20 a game. Could.
We don't have a very high bar for these late quarterbacks. I guess, well, I'll wait for it to get to me before I fully make the case. Rodgers is one of the guys that I'm fine with clicking on here. Just high upside assets in the offense and fantasy. The ADP doesn't make a tremendous amount of sense to me relative to where Wilson, Breece Hall are going. So that's to take year in and year out. We usually have at least one offense that's like that. I get that he's 97 years old and he's coming off of an Achilles injury, but there are worse gambles down here. Guys that we have talked about extensively already, Bryce Young, Derek Carr, and Bo Nix. Why not a former MVP that has the ceiling, because we've seen it before. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to just continue to be a complete homer. Demario Douglas has looked like just like the most consistent option in the passing game for the New England Patriots. So I will take him here. And then my favorite quarterback late to click on, I was making the case at the beginning of the show today, is Drake May with his rushing upside. But we have a conflict with week 14 buys, so I don't think I want to take him on this team. So as I was building up to it, I don't think I can do that here.
This has happened to me a couple times. The only available starting quarterback has the same buy as my starter, and I get no quarterback points for a week.
Could double stack Lamar with Bateman. I could go for Adam Thielen and try to back stack with Bryce Young. I think that's what I'm going to do.
I like it.
Because Adam Thielen, veteran player, probably still going to have a large role. We'll see. That's the plan now. We're going to try to get Bryce Young.
So speaking of the Patriots, one of your guys here, Antonio Gibson, did you know he was younger than Ramondre?
That is surprising. I honestly would never have guessed that.
Yeah. Let me just make sure that's right. I saw someone say that on Twitter. It's by
Antonio
months.
Gibson,
yeah. They're both 26.
26 years old. Okay. But still, Gibson is younger than I would expect because he's been in the league longer.
Yeah. He feels like he's 30. Way. Yeah. Feels like a full-on vet, while Ramondre is still like the up-and-coming guy. But he's not. That was mixed in with... So you did just mention Demario Douglas. Juju started for the Patriots, but then he got cut. Jalen Poke did not start, but that doesn't matter at all. And then Javon Baker played into the fourth quarter and didn't look great, but no notes on any of the other guys.
I think, again, no notes on it. Still a relatively low ADP. I think the player, if you've been super into following New England's training camp, which God bless you if you have been like us. KJ Osborne is the name that keeps getting mentioned the most as like being super involved with the top string at receiver, and ADP isn't really aligned with that. So if you are looking for an opportunity to exploit Chuck, I do think KJ Osborne is still a pretty decent, high upside pick in the last round, especially if his ADP is just not going to move.
I have a bunch of KJ, yeah, especially on teams where I feel like maybe I need just a kind of floor guy. And then on teams where I kind of need to take a shot, I'm still taking Kendrick Bourne here and there.
Did we see anything from guys we didn't fully expect in preseason week 1 that has forced us to at least consider clicking on their name? And Chuck, the player that I see flashing with an ADP now that I did not see flashing with an ADP really at all until this week, I'm talking, of course, about your Los Angeles Rams and rookie wide receiver Jordan Whittington after his big game in preseason week 1. How are we feeling about him?
Ask me how many times I've drafted him in the past 3 days.
Over or under 4.5 times? Where are you at? Like, you probably over.
14.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, what are you just being a homer there a little bit, buying into the hype, or do you think there's really a chance he's going to have an actual role this season?
It's more like mixing up my round 18 picks because remember I'm in 300 slows right now, and so I'm finishing drafts every day, and I can't click the same guys: KJ Osborne, Noah Brown, Greg Dortch isn't even in the 18th round anymore, and so Jordan Whittington. It just seems like, can he overtake Demarcus Robinson? I don't see why not.
I that's a good way to put it. I think a bad way to put it would be, he's the new Puka Nacua. I think that's a little too aggressive, but it is a very similar use case. Yep. Made a debut in the first week of the preseason. We've already got the Rams and McVay talking about basically bubble wrapping him. They've seen enough from him. They don't want to necessarily have a big role for Whittington at all for the rest of the preseason. So I do think clicking on him at the end of drafts makes sense now in the 18th round. If he's in 3 wide receiver sets, even if it's not the beginning of the season, if it's at the end of the season, Whittington looks like one of these opportunities we weren't necessarily aware of for best ball drafts until the last few days here. And I think I probably want to mix him in as well. Might be something I'm interested in on this team to get some correlation with my Marvin Harrison pick in the first round, to be completely honest with you.
I love it. Yeah, it's just like I'm drafting Puka and Cooper Kupp as if they're fully healthy, but we know stuff happens in either way. Like, we know Sean McVay has no problem going to the new guy if they show they deserve it. So we found our Puka. We just got to find our Kyron.
They're daring me to continue to click on Antonio Gibson, so I will accept that. I still think he's going to have a pretty solid role in fantasy. I think he's my highest projected player left on the board at the position here in the 15th round. I'm definitely not going to sneeze on that.
Are you done at running back?
It could be. Well, I've already got my tight ends. I just need one more quarterback. So I might be landing on a traditional 2-6-8-2 here, to be honest with you. We'll see how things go here. Yeah, because I kind of like I like Braylon Allen here. Breece Hall did not play in week 1. Braylon Allen played all the snaps with the top unit, was utilized in both the run and the pass game. So kind of confirmed what we were thinking about Braylon Allen, right, Chuck? He has a use case even if Breece Hall is healthy, but if something happens there, then like wheels all the way the fuck up. So
who was the team that was supposed to take him? Was it the Cowboys? Imagine if he was starting for the Cowboys. I guess he wouldn't start because Jerry Jones.
I was going to say, as fun as that is to imagine, it's not going to happen. But Thank you for bringing that up.
Tony Pollard.
I still love clicking on Tony Pollard. I feel like John, Jets 13 here, loves every single time I click on Braylon Allen because I'm giving him some of his Jets love. Right. I may have just cost myself Bryce Young. That's the only thing that may have just happened here, but we'll see how that goes. It's one of those things where I'm going to put my head on the pillow tonight and be completely okay if I don't have Bryce Young. So don't get me wrong. I'm not worried about it, but I'm now officially fighting ADP to get my second quarterback at pick 203 here. We might just be, by default, landing on the cover boy of the show, Sam Darnold.
Wouldn't be an awful thing, would it?
It's not a great thing, but it's not a terrible thing. I will concede that to you. Chuck, we're going to ramp up some of our drafts here on the Occupied Best Ball channel over the next 3 weeks. I think one of the ideas that we were kicking around before we went live was a marathon show. I am, of course, talking about the marathon contest here on Underdog, which is the regular season contest, weeks 1 through 17, $300,000 up for grabs to first place. It's only 30% full with 3 weeks to go to kick off. It seems like a very, very high floor tournament that we could throw some of our entry dollars at here as we close out the summer. So I'm really excited actually to talk about that format here.
Yeah, I'm looking at it like because I wasn't going to enter that many, but now I'd like to get in like 100. If I don't break even in this tournament, it's a disaster. So to me, I like, and it's a likely outcome still that I lose a little bit. But the advantage you're getting from having this few entrants in a prize pool designed for 150K, and it'll still get to at least 80%, if not 85% full, but just massive EV for this contest specifically. And one thing I like about it too, the ADPs don't update nearly as quickly as they do for contests like BBM because this is not getting drafted as much. Like I'm in a bunch of weekly winter slows right now, and the ADPs are not updating just because there's not that many drafts done. So I think there's an inherent edge in there too with how much people are trying to take advantage of training camp news and preseason stuff.
Whittington 192. I think we schemed him on this show.
I've done it. Yeah, I've taken him in the 16th too. Like at that point, I just want him on my teams. Bryce Young gone, Drake May. Yeah, this.
Dude, it got ugly quick. It definitely got ugly quick. Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson.
Honestly, if Derek Carr is still there, I feel pretty fine. I'd feel fine about that.
Derek Carr, maybe I can backstack him with A.T. Perry.
I love that.
Right.
Or who's Minnesota's wide receiver too? Someone get drafted.
Oh, there we go. Well, if there's something wrong with Addison, which it doesn't sound like there is, it sounds like it's just an ankle injury. Who's there? Brandon Powell? Is that the wide receiver 3 that's not getting selected at all for Minnesota? Jalen Naylor had a big preseason game. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's freaking ugly. It's ugly down here. I'm gonna throw up in my mouth a little bit with these picks to close out the draft. This is disgusting. We are terrible people.
I'm going to take 18 Derek receiver Carr. Too. Oh, A.T. Perry.
Probably. Juwan Johnson wouldn't have been the worst pick there. I'm glad I went with Braylon Allen though when I did, because now I don't have to worry about kind of a lottery ticket running back down here. I've already kind of locked in all the guys that I want. Yeah, what the hell, man. Derek Carr's ADP. It's not week 14, right? It's week 12. All right, so we're good there. And high ADOT receiver. I think Moose here talked a lot about how A.T. Perry was like a perennial staple of our underperforming wide receiver list for college football DFS, and still has a very similar role in this Saints offense. Came on pretty strong at the end of the season last year, at least in terms of what his role was in their offense. Was someone we were playing in daily fantasy formats pretty heavily at the end of the season at a cheap salary. So how A.T. Perry is going to be one of those guys, Chuck, that I think is probably drafted on like less than, let's say, 20% of Best Ball Mania 5 rosters. And if he ends up being the guy that you need in the playoff weeks because he has a consistent role and the Saints are beating expectation, like, I've built a roster here. I'm trying to talk myself and the viewers into it, right? Where hopefully like a Lamar Jackson offense is carrying me to the promised land. But then once we get there, what if Derek Carr, A.T. Perry is the combo you need in the championship? I'm going to be the only person that has
that. I just went through the 29 BBMs that I have done, and A.T. Perry's, other than by me, A.T. Perry's only been drafted once.
So there you go. Not a tremendous amount of upside there, but listen, we were trying to make some kind of correlation happen at the end here because I waited a little too long at quarterback. This is why we have to be flexible and adjust while we're on the clock, which is not always easy when you are also doing a show at the exact same time, something you and I know very, very well. Chuck, this was awesome. I think we're going to run it back tomorrow. I think you and I are going to do a show at some point tomorrow. We don't exactly have timing on that just yet for you guys because preseason week 2 does kick off tomorrow afternoon. I believe Brian will be back on the regular Occupy Fantasy DFS channel with some content about the Patriots and the Eagles game that kicks off the second week of the preseason. But I think shortly after that, probably almost certainly. Chuck, do you want to do this at the same time tomorrow? Why don't we just lock it in now?
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
All right. So if you guys get sick of watching the Philadelphia Eagles defense sack Patriots quarterbacks by about 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, come hang it here and watch Chuck and I draft another best ball team here on Underdog Fantasy. Chuck, this was awesome. Thanks for being a good host tonight.
Hey, appreciate you joining me. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out.